So in this segment, we're going to be talking about tons of seasonal food left in the ground in British fields to rot, and combine that with a further article about the labour shortages have left tons of food unpicked on British farms. And we'll talk about the end of freedom of movement and the impact it's had on that. So if we go to this video first from Sky News.
They harvest spring onions all day in all weathers. This is hard graft, paid by the bunch. And the workers here have come from all over the world. But since Brexit, every one of them needs a special visa. And this year, workers have been in short supply, with claims of visa delays and the war in Ukraine leaving hundreds of thousands of bunches in the ground.
So you got to think that, whilst we're members of the EU, I think for the most part, EU workers would not need visas or any kind of work permits to come here and work. I think there were some exceptions for one or two countries. But given the fact that we live in, obviously, a post-Brexit world, anyone that wants to come here to work in the farms has to have a visa. And that causes a massive problem with the Home Office, because these visas take weeks potentially to be processed, when for other countries they only take a few days. So it could be a question of the Home Office being incompetent and also being overwhelmed. It depends how bad the situation is. But this video about the farmers, it's pretty grim.
Finding people now is becoming increasingly difficult. At the beginning of May, we were 40% short of the people we should have here. They were all recruited, they just hadn't got the visas processed. We lost £750,000 bunches of spring onions with a value of about 100,000. So overall, shortage of labour cost us £250,000 in May.
And it's not just onions. This is what asparagus looks like when you stop picking it.
So, they've lost a significant amount of money. That asparagus is going to have to be dealt with somehow. Maybe they'll burn it, I don't know, but they're still going to have to get rid of this, and that's still going to come with a labour cost as well.
In May, they had to flatten the spears to buy time as they waited for workers. And when they did arrive, they weren't enough.
They should have been harvesting this asparagus until the third week of June, but the labour shortage meant they couldn't keep up with growth and they had to stop at the start of May.
And, that's all money that's being wasted, especially with the labour costs. That's going to, you're still going to have to pay people to get rid of this stuff. So what they're going to do is they're just going to plant less, and it's going to make the food shortage in the UK far worse. That's what's going to happen here, because we have a situation where we're going to have to import more from the rest of the world, or the EU, however you want to phrase it. And with a weakening pound, those imports are going to go up significantly in terms of cost as well as volume. These are the key problems we're facing right now.
Letting these plants grow to fern and leaving 45,000 kilos of asparagus worth £150,000 in the ground.
Last year, the government granted 30,000 seasonal worker visas. Of these, 19,614, more than 60%, went to Ukrainians. This year, an extra 10,000 visas have been granted, taking the total to 40,000. But the National Farmers Union estimates 75,000 are needed to meet demand.
And, they need a lot more to meet demand. Obviously, the situation in Ukraine, we all know what's going on with the Russian invasion. But the question is, why is it that so many Ukrainians that are applying for these visas? I think it's a simple fact that to work in the EU, Ukrainians would need a visa, to work in the farming sector, for example, so they can see the UK as a viable option because of the amount we pay, etc. And the fact that EU nations can rely on freedom of movement rather than third country workers, whilst the UK in a situation where pretty much everyone's a third country. And so what that means is we have to compete for these visa applications, if that makes sense. So effectively, we are so reliant on third countries that everyone who wants to come here to work needs a visa, be they EU workers or non-EU workers. So that makes the UK a viable option for third country workers, because we pay more and we don't have to compete as much with the EU because they have their own set of workers, if that makes sense.
The government plans to end the scheme altogether in 2024, but the Conservative chairman of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee said that could stop investment.
It wants to be a permanent scheme. If you're planting a vineyard or building a pack house, you need to be sure that you can have labour to come and do that work into the future.
This migration expert says cutting labour may change what British farmers grow.
You could imagine a scenario where the scheme tapers down and agriculture in the UK, particularly labour-intensive bits of the agricultural industry, like soft fruit, just become smaller.
The
not
government.
for soft fruit. And point being is, if they start tapering down these applications, where are you going to get the workforce from? Because people in the UK don't want to do these jobs. Especially amongst a cost of living crisis that we have now. You've got labour shortages on British farms have left tons of food unpicked, costing millions of pounds and pushing food inflation as high as 20%. 20% increase in food costs. That's wild to me, honestly. Like, especially in a country where people struggle so much to make ends meet, you're pushing up the food price because you decided to leave the EU, end freedom of movement, and put ourselves in a situation where we don't even have the people to pick the fruit and the vegetables out of the ground that we are harvesting here, that we are growing here. It's madness. Farmers say this year harvest has been hit by a shortfall in the overall number of seasonal visas granted by the Home Office, delays in processing the visas, and a collapse in the number of Ukrainian workers coming to the UK after the Russian invasion. Men can't leave Ukraine pretty much. Last year, more than 60% of the visas came from Ukraine and 8% from Russia. The Russian ones are being rejected outright. That's a Home Office decision. But 60%, the vast majority of the people who applied to work in the UK's farming, agricultural sector were from Ukraine. That's not going to happen anymore. So the question is, where are we going to get the workers to work in the farms now? It's not going to happen. He's saying if we haven't got the people, we simply can't harvest the crop, said Mr. Wilkinson. We try to recruit locally, there just aren't the people out there. British people don't want to do seasonal work. If you live in the UK, you need a permanent job. I don't think that's 100% true, but the fact is, I think most people would rather a permanent job, but the main problem is that this work is very labour intensive. It's very difficult on you, and people in this country, I don't think, want to do those sorts of jobs. It was taking some visas around 6 to 7 weeks to get processed. That's almost 2 months. Mr. Wilkins saying, I speak to growers in Holland and Germany, all doing the same thing, and they can get a visa processed in a few days. So I'm not sure why it takes so long. Now, it could be incompetency at the Home Office, but it also could be just the sheer volume. I'm assuming that we'd be dealing with more kind of visa applications than Germany or Holland would be for the agricultural sector. Could be wrong on that one. But that's purely because Germany and Holland, they have access to EU freedom of movement, so they have access to a massive labour pool of agricultural workers, whilst the UK only has the UK. So that's not good, is it? As a result, his company have lost 40 to 45,000 kilograms of asparagus with a value of 150,000 and 750,000 bunches of spring onions, which cost around 100,000. But it's not just a cost to him; it's a cost to the country as well, because I don't know if they're going to use these for export reasons. But there's a massive shortage of these sorts of vegetables on the market. So what that does, it creates a scarcity, which pushes the average cost of asparagus and spring onions in this case up, because there's a shortage. And that further pushes up the cost of living. That, combined with higher input costs, higher staffing costs potentially, means that food price is going to continue to go up. There's a reason why it's at 20% food inflation right now. It's one of the only routes for low-skilled, low-pay workers to enter the UK from abroad, talking about the visas. Previously, most seasonal workers came from the European Union without restriction, and the idea that these are, low-skilled jobs, like just, the best ability is availability, and evidently the agricultural workers in the EU must be some of the best around, because, they came in season after season and we barely had any problems with harvest. Now look at us. The idea that it's low skills ridiculous, and the low pay aspect is another thing that will have to get looked at. There's nothing else really I wanted to cover in this article, but point being is that if you're a farm and you're going to go to the money, you're not going to make any real money until the harvest happens. So all of this stuff, all of the planting, all of this stuff, it costs money, and until you have it comes to harvest, you won't make anything. So what that means is, if you're not confident you can harvest the fruits and vegetables you're putting in the ground or growing, however way you're doing it, there's no point in you doing it, because you're not going to make anything off it. And if anything, it's going to come at a loss, because you're going to have to dispose of this stuff in order to plant next year's harvest. Disposal still costs money. And this is a situation in the UK where we've really shot ourselves in the foot here. 20% increase in food costs. Mad. Inflation's at 11%. I still don't believe the consumer price index number. Genuinely, I don't. I think it's higher than they're putting out, because the Bank of England are playing games here. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.